All right, so welcome to Tiki Talk with Bryan. I'm Bryan, and we're going to talk about the tiki culture and how it relates to Hawaii. Now, in order to do so, we're going to have to talk about some backstory of Hawaii, a little bit of history. It's not happy history, as often is the case with anything involving the U.S. government, but I promise there will be some happy moments as we discuss things later. So, in the 18th century, Hawaii was, quote, discovered by Captain James Cook. He was a British sailor, and this was in the 1770s. And at the time, Hawaii was a kingdom ruled by King Kamehameha I. He was the first king to unite the islands of Hawaii. And, excuse me. In doing so, in discovering Hawaii, James Cook discovered where he also would die because he, in a misunderstanding on the coast of Hawaii, was killed by Hawaiian warriors. So this established kind of the first contact with Western society, so to speak. And in the 1790s, an escaped British convict made his way to Hawaii and actually taught Native Hawaiians how to distill what was called okolehau. And this is from T-I, not T-E-A, tea leaves. It's a plant, big green leafy plant, kind of looks like, it kind of looks like a taro plant if you've ever seen that. But anyways, using the tea and then adding some sugar, they were able to distill what today is called Hawaiian moonshine. And in the 1830s, we start seeing rum start to be distilled. Excuse me, because rum is distilled from molasses. Molasses is a byproduct of making table sugar, refined white sugar. So we start seeing the sugar plantations grow throughout Hawaii. We start seeing Japanese and Portuguese and later on the Chinese and Filipinos and all these different nationalities come over to live in Hawaii and work on these plantations. And so a lot of cultural blending takes place as well. In the 1870s, we see the first export of commercially produced rum. And progressing through into the early 1900s, the early 20th century, we start to see like a lot of prevalence of interest in Hawaiian culture from mainland United States. So backing up a little bit, in 1893, Hawaii also was a kingdom. At this time it was ruled by Queen Liliuokalani, who would end up being the last Hawaiian monarch. In 1893, the, quote, Committee of Safety, unquote, was established by a man named Sanford Dole of the Dole pineapple and Dole fruit plantations, and some other powerful businessmen who had interest in Hawaii, who were in Hawaii operating as businessmen. And they basically take the queen and place her under house arrest. Now, Iolani Palace was the palace of the monarchy. It was built by King David Kalakaua. Kalakaua is how you'll hear it pronounced. It's actually Kalakaua. And that was the monarch previous to Queen Liliuokalani. So it was a new palace. It actually had electric lights before the White House did. That's how modern it was. She was placed under house arrest, and in 1894, there is a new government with Sanford Dole at the head of it that proclaims they are now the Republic of Hawaii. In 1897, the Treaty of Annexation as a territory of the United States is signed, but it's not quite yet completed. In 1898, it is officially annexed as part of the Spanish-American War acquisitions that the United States had. So you had Guam, you had the Philippines, Cuba, Puerto Rico, all these territories the United States acquired. And they said, well, we'll go ahead and take Hawaii at the same time. And then in 1900, it officially becomes the territory of Hawaii. It is a U.S. territory with Sanford Dole as the first governor of Hawaii. In 1959, Hawaii residents, territory residents, vote for statehood. And so in August of 1959, the 50th star is added to the United States flag, and that is for Hawaii. So Hawaii is known as the 50th state. It's also known as the 808 state because the area code of Hawaii is 808, and there's only one area code in all of Hawaii, and that's 808. So backing up a little bit, December 7th, Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy as President FDR calls it. Japan attacks, the Empire of Japan, I should say, attacks the United States at Pearl Harbor. There are two battleships that are completely destroyed, the USS Arizona with 1,177 bodies on board, and the USS Oklahoma, which is right next to it. There are 6 other battleships that are essentially wounded. They are able to be repaired at a later date. During the attack itself, the USS Nevada tries to leave Pearl Harbor and is trying to go out to sea because a battleship can defend itself far better out at sea. The planes see this and begin to attack it, and so the captain of the USS Nevada has the crew beach the ship at kind of the edge of the Pearl Harbor entrance, but not so that it would block ships being able to get in and out like repair ships. So to this day, that's known as Hospital Point or Nevada Point because there was a hospital there at that time. Slightly interesting side note, I actually used to work in that building. It's no longer a hospital. It's now used for a different purpose. But it was always interesting to just look out the window and know that, you know, there was so much history that took place there. So there are 2 waves of planes that are sent in to attack the ships. Famously, the third is held back. It is known, or it is thought today, that had this third wave have been released, it is more than likely that the base would have been completely destroyed. But for whatever reason, Japan did not send that third wave in. So that was able to assist the United States in getting back up on its feet and back into a warfighting position that much quicker. On December 8th, 1941, Congress almost unanimously votes for war. There was one senator, she voted no. Her reason being is that she was a pacifist and she did not believe in war, period. I understand her sentiment. I really do. So, martial law is declared not long after. The military was the law of the land, again, because this is a territory. Curfews and blackouts across the island are issued, and the Japanese immediately become under suspicion. Now, there have been Japanese at this time in Hawaii for almost 100 years, but at the, just the sentiment being, well, you're one of them, unfortunately. So this led to 3 months later, February of 1942, Executive Order 9066 is issued by President FDR, and this was the forceful internment into concentration camps of everyone of Japanese descent throughout the United States. This is wrong. It just incredibly wrong. But during war, a lot of times, these things are not really understood, or if they are understood, they just get pushed to the back burner. An interesting side note: spam enters into Hawaiian culture about this time because there are a lot of needs for rationing and for supplying food on the islands. And Spam is brought over. It was very popular. I don't know if it was popular, but it was sent to servicemen all throughout the world. And Hawaii had a large stockpile of it. After the war is over, they leave that stockpile there in Hawaii, and a lot of Hawaiian residents take it, start cooking with it, and to this day, it is a mainstay of Hawaii residents' cuisine. So, at this time, also the Royal Hawaiian Hotel, which was a very famous hotel, a very beautiful hotel as well, that is taken over by the U.S. government, and during wartime, it is used for rest and relaxation, R&R for short, for service members throughout the Pacific campaign, especially submariners, to kind of rest and relax before they went back to war. Excuse me. So, in the 1930s, backing up a little bit, in the 1930s, you had these two men, Don Beach, and his real name is not Don Beach, but that was what he liked to go by, and Vic Bergeron, more commonly known as Trader Vic. These two men kind of start the interest in the tiki culture beginning in the United States folklore, essentially. Trader Vic was in the Merchant Marines and had traveled to the South Pacific and had seen this stuff firsthand. And Don Beach was a businessman who just kind of had an eye for these things. And they both opened their first tiki bars. Trader Vic opens his in Hollywood in 1932. 1933. Don Beach opened his in Oakland in 1934. What's happening in the zeitgeist at the time is that there happens to be a couple movies made by Hollywood that took place in the South Pacific. In 1932, you had Robinson Crusoe, and based on the book by Daniel Defoe, written 200 years earlier. 1933, you had King Kong, and if you remember the movie, King Kong came from a tropical mythical island in the Pacific, and they shipped him over, and then he ends up climbing the Empire State Building, which was brand new when that movie came out. And in 1935, you have Charles Lawton and a very young Clark Gable star in a movie called Mutiny on the Bounty, based on the book that was written about 150 years earlier. In the movie and in the book, the HMS Bounty sails to Tahiti, and there's a lot of tales of mythical tropical paradise. Breadfruit was brought into the mainstay, and in Hawaiian it's called ulu, but breadfruit is growing out there in Hawaii and eaten. And so you have this interest in Hollywood, and then these guys start to popularize the way that these things are going. And you also have some anti-Japanese sentiment at this time based on what the Empire of Japan was doing throughout China and Manchuria, and this gave rise to the Aloha shirt. This it's because in 1930s Honolulu, the kimono textile industry was kind of taking a hit because these anti-Japanese sentiment, nobody wanted to buy this Japanese cultural stuff. So they had all this extra cloth left over. And then someone said, well, why don't we take it and kind of cut it loose, because in tropical climates you want to wear it loose. Let's cut it where it fits loosely, and let's sell it, put a collar on it and sell it as what's called an Aloha shirt, because you still had tourists that were coming over by ship. Planes weren't really all that common at this time, but they were coming over by ship. So, they'd get off this cruise ship or this, steamer, and there's these stands of kimono, aloha shirts. And so they'd buy one, take it back home, and you started seeing it in movies and all that stuff. So the interest in Hawaii is starting to flourish. And when the attack happens on Pearl Harbor, these kinds of things, Hawaii is kind of thrust into the foreground of a lot of American sentiments. And so right about this time, it starts to go mainstream. World War II is starting to kick up for the United States, and servicemen would train in boot camp on the mainland. A lot of these places were in California, so these tiki bars are starting to pop up along the coast and places like that. And then they would get sent to Hawaii a lot of times, and they'd have a couple days to relax, change ships before they would go over to battle in the Pacific Theater. Well, while they were in Hawaii, the adult entertainment industry was very popular. So the phrase that they would like to use was, before they would leave Hawaii, they wanted to be stewed, screwed, and tattooed. Stewed meaning they wanted to get drunk, tattooed meaning they wanted to get a popular tattoo, and screwed did not relate to carpentry or a ship. You can kind of figure out what that means, though. So in these bars, these tiki drinks, people are asking for, I want one of those like tiki drinks and stuff. So they're starting to get popular. The Zombie was the first drink to go mainstream. That was very popular. They used a couple different kinds of rum. It was very strong. A couple years later, in the early 40s, the Mai Tai was invented. If you drink a Mai Tai in Hawaii today, it is most of the time not very close to the original recipe. But these sailors and these Marines, they wanted this like tropical stuff. They wanted rum. They didn't want like whiskey or any of that. They wanted rum. They wanted the fruit drinks. They wanted orange, pineapple, stuff you associate with the tropics. And so these bartenders got to work creating these different drinks. They like I said, the Zombie, the Mai Tai, 3 dots and a dash, that came from Morse code. That was for victory. The dot 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 dot. That was a very common drink as well. And so these sailors would go off to war with this longing for these days, these happy days. Hopefully whenever the war was going to end, that they would be able to kick back into it. So after the war ended, they have all these fond memories of going to see these things for themselves. These Marines have these memories of Guadalcanal and Peleliu and all these different tropical islands that they fought on. Some died on, and they came back from war. They didn't have a way to deal with PTSD. They didn't have a way to deal with these things that they were feeling inside, and they missed that camaraderie. And so the tiki bars stayed pretty popular because they wanted to kind of like relive that nostalgia of the days where they were partying with their now departed friends and shipmates and fellow Marines, and they wanted to kind of like relive those happy days again. So they sought out these places that were able to provide them with what they had before, and it was very therapeutic for them. And when you add on to that America had a post-World War II economic boom, because as they say, war is great for the economy. These things were just, it's what they wanted. They didn't want to deal with life. They didn't want to, assimilate back into society, any of that stuff. They wanted to kind of get away from it. And these bars, these tiki bars, it gave them a sense of familiarity. It gave them a way to feel normal again. And a lot of times when someone comes back from war and they're living in environments that are everything but normal. That's all they want. They want normalcy back. So in the early 50s, you had this man from Tupelo, Mississippi, by the name of Elvis Presley, who kind of starts to get popular, gets drafted, does his time in the military, and then comes back and he starts his movie star career. And Hawaii becomes a state in 1959. The residents of Hawaii voted for it to become a state. And around this time, Elvis Presley starts filming a movie in Hawaii called Blue Hawaii. This was filmed some on Oahu, but most of it was filmed on the island of Kauai, which is just northwest of Oahu, but still a Hawaiian island. And, Elvis is huge at this time. Well, he's wearing this, aloha shirts on camera, singing about Hawaii, the South Pacific, all that. And so the tiki culture is just booming, and everyone wants to be involved in it. In the early 1960s, Hollywood takes the tiki culture and runs with it when they have this show called Gilligan's Island. And these tiki bars are popping up in Florida. They're popping up everywhere. It's just everywhere. It's so popular. There's a hotel that's built that's like a tiki culture hotel. I mean, even in modern times, you can go to Disney and there's the Polynesian Resort, and there's all these like tiki drinks and stuff, and so it's huge and it's big. And then in the 1960s, all that kind of starts to change in the late 1960s because the Vietnam War kicks off. You have a lot of counterculture because a lot of and this is tiki culture kind of starts getting shunned because it's not only like that was what my parents did, and in a counterculture realm, you want to get away from that. But it was also like seen as very problematic because in the movies, anytime they would depict, natives to the islands, like your Fijians or Samoans or Tongans, Vanuatu, any of that, they were like depicted as very primitive. They were depicted as bloodthirsty, headhunters, head shrinking, all that stuff. Just all this. These thousands of miles of people are all just lumped into like one culture, and that people were looking for different at that time. Plus, they may have watched Gilligan's Island growing up, but that was what their parents wanted them to do, and so they started kind of shunning everything that their parents enjoyed, and so you started seeing a lot of like moving away from stuff that their parents did. And so a lot of the tiki bars started closing down. That nostalgia wasn't there. It was something that you wanted to dispel. And also there wasn't as much alcohol. There was still a lot of drinking, but it wasn't like a lot of rum. They wanted to drink drinks that, their parents would be upset about. So vodka comes into the mainstream. Whiskey starts coming back. And there's also a lot of drug use, a lot of, LSD, a lot of marijuana. And so it never dies off, but it definitely becomes much less mainstream. And then recently, I would say in the last 20 years or so, there's been a resurgence bringing tiki culture back. There's a bar in Hawaii called La Mariana Sailing Club, and this bar, when all these bars started to close down in the 60s and 70s and 80s, they bought all the original, like the tiki statues and the colored glass globes, and the ship rigging that you would see on the walls and stuff. They bought all of that, and they have that as decor in their place. So you walk in, you instantly feel like you're transported 50 years in the past. And I really appreciate that because there's nothing like history coming alive and history being remembered. So Hawaii is very mainstream, instrumental in a lot of the tiki culture, because it was not only was it like a stopover going from mainland America to the South Pacific, but it was also a way that people were able to, honor their grandparents. And for about an 18-month period in the late 90s, early 2000s, swing dancing came back. There was a lot of like swing bands that were huge. Glenn Miller, all of a sudden everyone knew who Glenn Miller was again. And I kind of look at that the same as the tiki culture, because today you have people that are building tiki bars in their homes, in their basements, outfitting their garages, their very own living room, turning it into like, South Pacific hideaway and places like that. And I love that, especially because, Hawaii is very instrumental in a lot of that. And, if you go to Hawaii today, you'll meet people that will quickly tell you, I'm American of Hawaiian descent, or they like to say, we're grown here, you're flown here, or they'll say things like, there's a great distinction between Hawaiians and Hawaii residents. And I understand what they mean, because a Hawaiian it's an ethnicity. It's a people that were unfortunately marginalized by American society for a long time, especially after the overthrow. And it was an illegal overthrow. In 1993, 100 years after the overthrow took place, President Bill Clinton issued a formal apology and a formal acknowledgement that the role of the United States government in the illegal overthrow of Hawaii is incredibly regrettable, and unfortunately it was illegal. Arguably, Hawaii is in a much better place economically today, but it's maybe not a place that they would have chosen. If you give a lot of Hawaiians, people of Native Hawaiian descent, if you were to say, which would you rather, a lot of times you will hear them say, I want to have the old Hawaii back, but I understand that it's not possible. And I understand that. And so I think when I myself, I'm like trying a new cocktail that's inspired by, Hawaiian culture or ethnicity or the tiki culture, I kind of think about those things. I think about I think about in some ways trying to like honor those that were instrumental in bringing that kind of thing about. So anyways, this has been Tiki Talk with Bryan, and hope to do it again soon. This song is called Aloha Oi. It was written by Queen Liliuokalani herself, and it is probably the most well-known Hawaiian song ever. It was written about two lovers. Aloha Oi means until we meet again.